You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Thanks for joining us, as always, on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Muchas gracias once again for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. We appreciate it each day. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and Chris, as we kicked off the week yesterday, very much still in a basketball frame of mind, of course, as you've got a coaching search ongoing. We have a transfer portal window opening up for names to be entered there. Catch up with some of what you might have missed if you didn't catch yesterday's episode right now on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. But something has been on our minds as we're here with you once again today as it relates to your football head coach. You've got some characters on campus. You've got some successful head coaches. You've got some head coaches that fit in very well with what Texas Tech is, with what Lubbock and West Texas is, with what Red Raiders expect. And I think, Chris, when you've got the crossover of the search committee that we talked about on yesterday's show involving one of those coaches and Joey McGuire, and the recent energy and momentum that's been injected into that football program, therein lies the reason why you might have heard by now a Texas Tech fan in your life talk about needing to find the basketball equivalent of Joey McGuire. Much easier said than done, right, Chris? But I'm wondering, what does that actually mean? What do you think is actually there that's worked well in a short amount of time for Coach McGuire? And if you could think up, what does this look like in a basketball sense? How do you paint that picture?
I think the reason if Joey would have gone 5-8, okay, in year one, I don't know if we're having this conversation. Not that we wouldn't have wanted to. But I think that, first of all, he won in year one. I mean, winning those last four games and the bowl game the way that they did and just the way that they kind of progressed throughout the season, it puts him in a different kind of conversation now and I think, or even on campus and all those things, because of how mediocre you'd been at football over the last decade. Not that you hadn't been good in spots, but and I think based on what the expectations are for this next year. So that's the first thing. But I think you when you're talking about Joey, and this is why so many loved Chris too. Joey is very visible in the community. He's very engaging. He's very visible in the community. He shows up at different events. He's at different Texas Tech sporting events. He's very active on social media. I think people feel like that he's their friend, right, wrong, or indifferent. I feel like the guy kind of knows me, even though if they've never met him before. And if you ever do meet him, he's going to make you feel like you've known each other for forever. That is his genius. I think Chris when he was here, he was very visible in the community, and he befriended the community and a lot of people in it and made everybody feel like they were a part of it or they were an important part of it. And I think that's why it was so frustrating to a lot of folks whenever he did leave and went to Austin, because it's like they felt like that he really liked it here and wanted to be here and all those different things. So that's why everybody was so frustrated. But I think Joey has hit every right note. One, because he's won. Okay, that's the most important thing. You could be like this all you want, but if you don't win and the product isn't there that you're responsible for, it doesn't really equate. But he won. He's very visible. He's extremely intelligent, energetic, organized, all those things. Let's go back to, and this ties into the fit component. I think it was genius, some of the stuff that he had his team doing before spring break. There's two things I can tell you. They have what they call competition week. Okay. And this is part of the off season. You're trying to get these kids in shape. You're trying to get them to compete. You're trying them to stay organized. And it's kind of a culture component as well. But there's two different things that he did that I thought the guy just gets it, man. And he grasps not just this place, but what you're asked to do in creating a culture and get the most out of your kids and make everybody feel a part of it. And so the first thing he does is they have competition week. They break his team up into a variety of different teams. You've seen a lot of the social media stuff that's been out there. But part of the competitions were go to this different place on campus. Go get your picture made with the marketing folks, because he's getting his team to see and touch all parts of campus. They learn more about their campus. They learn more about the people that are selling tickets to their own games and start putting faces and shake some hands. And you require it as part of a competition. You go put your football players in front of Wes Kitley and say, man, you got to go take a picture with the track folks. You got to go over to baseball. And it just creates this like camaraderie campus wide athletically that I just think that's what makes this place a bit different than most places. Okay. So I thought that's is very smart, because it gets his players out and about, that it creates a care factor there. And he just kind of grasps, the way that this place is different than most from that standpoint. And he's helping some of the new guys ingrain themselves with where parts of campus are that they may haven't seen yet, or different people that they need to meet yet. I mean, like over at the meat lab over there, there's a place where you can get, lunch and get some ice cream and all that. He sent them over there just so they could see that Cowamungas, I think is what it's named. It was over there in the meat science department. So I thought that was smart. The other thing that I thought he did was,
I just enjoyed hearing you say that word. Can you give me that at Cowamungas? Cowabunga?
I think that's right.
Okay.
I kind of mumbled it just because I wasn't entirely sure what it's called.
No, you nailed it.
I've had a prime rib sandwich over there before and some ice cream years and years ago. It was very, very good. And
Let's
that's
go.
from,
I think
those are from Texas Tech cows, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm listening to the new Cowamunga's Pitchman right here on Locked On
there
Texas
you go.
Tech, Chris Level. Okay,
I'm here for it.
Okay, I'm sorry to derail you there, but that was a first for Locked On Texas Tech. First time that word's been used, so we needed to mark the occasion.
Yeah. The other thing that I think he did, which I thought, this is because if we were to say, what is Joey's program identity right now, or what was his identity when he came here, I think most of us would agree really, really good and I don't know, famous or successful or respected Texas high school football coach. Okay. I think that is a fair, and Joey would want to be known as that. And obviously now he's very relevant in the college ranks. But one of the things he did at the tail end of their competition week that I thought was just genius is he divides all these kids up into these teams, right? And coaches, players, everybody associated with this deal had to wear their high school gear, okay? Something representing their high school. And then he broke them up into whatever region, whether it be Oklahoma or South Texas or Central Texas or East Texas. He breaks them up into all these regions and then allows them to compete with each other that way. And I thought, it's just because you're paying respects to these high schools, which is what he's trying to tap into. You're giving some street cred to the various places these kids have come from, and then you're kind of recreating a different way to compete and a different reason to compete because you're representing kind of where you're from to a certain extent.
Sure.
And I just think that high school coaches, I talked to 3 of them, they loved it. They thought it was just awesome, and it's why people want to send their kids here to play. That's a fit. That's a understanding where you're from. That is all those things. And so I think Joey being on this committee, as we kind of wrap it back around, he's going to know if a guy would be a fish out of water here in the state of Texas. And again, not to say that basketball and football are the same. You recruit differently, probably recruit a bit more nationally in basketball for sure. There's more of a portal influence there, I would say. So it's not apples to apples, but I think you understand what I'm saying by there needs to be a level of understanding the lay of the land here in Lubbock and in West Texas and Big 12 if somebody weren't to have been here before. And not that that's a requirement, but I think Joey would be able to kind of either help them or kind of go, man, I don't know. I don't know if that guy really grasps what he's getting into here or would fit in chemistry-wise with fan base or whatever. So I just wanted to tie spring football or kind of with the football program and Joey's involvement in the search committee to some of those points. Sorry for being long-winded there.
No, I've loved to see, and I didn't know, so I like the explanation that you've now given me. I didn't know what Texas Tech football was up to right now, but I just saw them being very active, and in so many different capacities. I saw while being active, Joey McGuire imploring them to compete. I mean, really, like you were referring to there, and beyond. Whether it was like a massive dodgeball game or something they had, it was just compete, compete, compete. I imagine you want to compete in all aspects. But yeah, as you're, looking across this campus, I think beyond Joey McGuire, as I already alluded to, you've got blueprints, people-wise, Chris, as to what fits and what works with Texas Tech. I don't know that we would all come up with exactly the same answer, but I bet if you asked a lot of Texas Tech fans, what's similar about Tim Tadlock and Wes Kitley? What's similar about Greg Sands or Tom Stone or crossing any of those streams otherwise? Guys that have really found sustained success and relevancy with Texas Tech sports in West Texas. There's something there, and I hope Joey McGuire is going to be on that list as well as far as sustained. But there are some common attributes, right? I think as to what is working for them in representing Tech. Today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. And now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Become a new customer because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, 3 points drained if basketball is your thing, or all points in between. Underwater basket weaving, anyone. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. But there are some common attributes, right? I think as to what is working for them in representing Tech.
Because let's just go off of that right there. I think that you mentioned some names there. Like Wes has been here for a long, long time. Tim has been here for a long, long time. Wildly successful. Greg has been here a long, long time. Wildly successful. I think you almost, like personality-wise, Joey fits in that conversation, even though he's only been here for a year and a half or whatever. What are the commonalities there between those guys and their personalities? Like, would you say?
I'd say personable and
Yes.
in a way, I don't think down to earth is right, but it's more so they are who they are every setting, every minute of the day. I don't think there's a special packaging necessarily for any particular company, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think they're very real.
I nailed it. Bullseye. I think they're real people. I think that, personalities. And again, each of these sports requires a bit of a different skill set and all that. I'm not trying to tie it all together. I just think that's why I just say fit is an important component to this. And it's up to the internal search committee to kind of identify that. And Norris knows this. Norris knows kind of what would work here, what wouldn't. I mean, Joey is a prime example of, and I think to Tech's credit, they weren't trying to win the press conference there. Joey ultimately won it for those that watched, but they weren't trying to make a huge splash with hiring Joey McGuire and trying to get all the news just to go crazy and all that, because sometimes that's the best part of a coaching tenure is like, we got this big name, holy cow. And then it just fizzles, and
I hate that. I hate the term "win the press conference."
Yeah,
I've never given a single damn about a press conference. And if it was Kirby Hocutt that was saying it, McGuire's all right. I got an idea: scripted Raider power right out of the gates. That's brilliant, but I don't think it was. I think it was organically Joey McGuire. But I hate that kind of what you're describing there, man. Yeah, you got the big boom up front, and then you got the bust on the other end, which means you really got nothing. Nobody's cherishing memories of a press conference without winning in competition, obviously.
Yeah, and I just don't think there can be any level of this that concerns you about that, because it's a big deal initially, and people watch and they pay attention to what is said and all those things. And when you have it at the arena and there's a lot of people in attendance and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of folks that pay attention to it. But then shortly after that, the work begins and you start trying to put a roster together, and then you start playing games, and that's all ultimately anybody will remember. And then it's what do you do? So again, you can't get caught up into trying to make a spot. And I don't think that they will. And I think to their credit, they weren't worried about that with Joey. Now, granted, he ended up winning it anyway. And not that anybody thought he was going to lose it. I think that was a bit of an outside the box hire, but it looks like a genius move, at least early on in his tenure here. So I don't get caught up into a big name this, or man, I don't really know who that is, or whatever. It's all about fit, and that's ultimately will decide if whoever is named head coach here can succeed here. And it's not just succeed here initially. Ideally, you want consistency. You want a winning program, not just a season, because as we just saw, Mark was wildly successful in one year and not at all in the next, so it's sustaining it is the key here. And you want somebody that just, again, is a good fit within the community, within the department, within the fan base. And do they have to have ties here? Not necessarily. If they don't have ties here, I think you have to potentially surround yourself with some people that do, just to kind of, help you with the lay of the land. That's why, like for football coaches, Tommy McVay was always like the first guy that they would say, "You're staying, you have a job, please help me," because you can tell me, hey, who I can trust, who I can't trust. Here's how it works here. Here's past precedents for this, or here's our budget for that, whatever it is, and so I'm being fairly long-winded, but I just say ultimately this is going to come down to not just who could potentially be the best coach out there, but who's the best coach that is the best fit here in Lubbock, Texas is really what you're looking for. Don't worry about if they're good in a year or two, they're going to leave. I don't worry about that either, because then if you find the right fit, you open up the checkbook and you keep them here, like Kansas State's probably going to do with Jerome Tang. And again, you did this with Chris Beard. You got to what would have been the third contract, I guess. And ultimately, he had another opportunity. He wanted to go back to his alma mater, but you were willing to pay, I think, around $6 million a year, which would have been a top 5 salary in the country at the time. So I think if you've already shown that if you find the right guy, you will pay them and pay them extremely well to stay here. So I don't worry about, we always have to be worried about them leaving and all those things.
You got to be hard scrabble. I know you got to be hungry. I think in so many ways, Chris, there are common attributes as far as the nature of your approach to every day that fit in with West Texas or fit in with those that have been successful at Texas Tech. And I think if you're in that kind of position, not a high maintenance type of person or whatever it might be, but you're really hungry, that's probably the word that it encompasses so many things you want them to be. You can go find success. And if the location is a fit for you, if Tech is a fit for you, maybe you sustain it, or maybe you take it elsewhere. I don't know. But I think you can find it here in Lubbock, Texas. There's no question about that. There's too many who have proven that over the years to believe otherwise. I'm curious, Chris, about the mechanism, the process of hiring a men's basketball coach now for Texas Tech compared to the last time that you were really getting it on. I talked a little bit yesterday about the resources and what you are as a job, and feeling like, today you have more to sell as a job than maybe you have ever in your program's history. But I was also curious as it relates to this committee that we're touching on here, or involvement from Kirby Hocutt, involvement from other external forces, not really search committees, but other parties maybe locally or on campus or with Texas Tech ties, regents, things like that. And I know that Dusty Womble is on the committee, but has that changed all that much since maybe the last time you were shopping either for like a Chris Beard or a Tubby Smith, the actual mechanism of how you're going out and doing it, do you think that's changed? Because I guess that's about a decade in the rear view now if we're talking about some of those other guys.
And you're talking about the process with which you'll hire somebody? Is that what you're
I just
saying?
wonder at various points, because I know it seems like sometimes just from football coach to football coach, they're like, well, now this guy is involved, and well, maybe this guy had sole discretion, once upon a time. Do you think it's changed? Because it's been a little while since, whether it was Coach Smith or Chris Beard, you were really out there just like, hey, help wanted sign is up.
I think, and I'll speak freely here, but I think Dusty changes the component a lot, and I think that in a good way. I think he was involved with whenever Beard left and Mark was hired, but if you remember, that facility wasn't even open then.
Yeah,
I mean, they were literally the week after Mark was hired, they started moving stuff from the arena over to that facility. So you really haven't, for all intents and purposes, you haven't just been able to recruit to that facility and use that facility for very long at all here. We're not even at 2 years in that thing. But I think, people have a lot of opinions about Dusty. He's very much, at the front of a lot of this stuff because of how active he is with his donations with football and basketball. And look, I think Texas Tech is extremely lucky to have Dusty involved. I think he's asked to be involved in a lot of instances. I don't necessarily think that he is saying, I want to be on this deal, include me or else. That's just not how he rolls.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think, and he said this, I think he was very much around the basketball program when Chris was the head coach. He was very much not around when Mark was the head coach. And I think that's kind of what potentially the two head coaches at the time preferred. I think that, and again, I say that. I mean, I don't know if Dusty was ever told, hey, you're not allowed to come by or anything like that. I think, Dusty can kind of do whatever he wants, but I don't think
he described that, right?
Yeah. I just don't think he abuses that at all. Yeah. He doesn't, he's not meddlesome. I just think he likes being involved, and he's a Red Raider like the rest of us and wants, but I think that component is a major difference, I think, but in a good way.
Yeah.
I think Dusty allows for, financial resources, and he's a regent for one, and I think, and he's a fan. Okay. He wants this thing to do well, but he's got a great business sense, a great feel of the community, and I think all those things, but I think that's a major difference in like kind of the immediacy of what you're talking now. And then the way it was, when Chris was hired or, when Tubby was hired, because that search for Tubby, it took a long time. And I think the difference now too, is that you can't afford to take a long time because the portal has changed the dynamic dramatically. The portal was basically just fairly new when Mark was hired, when everybody is allowed to move about freely and all those things. And I think you took great advantage of it because even you remember the Tariq Owenses and the Matt Moneys that Chris added, those were grad transfers. Those were guys that I believe, transferred and were allowed to kind of go anywhere they wanted to, because they were considered graduates. And now it's really anybody can transfer. And so I think because when Mark was, when Chris left, it would have been on like on April 1st. I'll never forget that day. And then you hire Mark, I don't know, 3 to 5 days after that or however long it took. And you're about a month or 3.5 weeks ahead compared to that timetable. So you've got some time. You just don't have you don't have an endless amount of time. There needs to be some speed with which you approach this. And I know that they all know that just because of the roster component and the transfer portal.
Can you remind me of the Tubby timeline, which is just a hilarious phrase? That was post Walker, correct? Chris Walker as an interim or whatever that time was.
Yes. So, when Pat Knight was the head coach, and then when he and Chris were fired, I'll never forget getting a phone call from was sitting in my office, and Chris Beard, after they left from the Big 12 tournament, they got home, and a few days later they got called in the president's office, and I think Pat did, and he was told, hey, you will not be retained. That they're going in a different direction. And if you remember, your basketball program was NIT-ish. I think they had a 1-year NIT run. They were trying to recruit like crazy from a high school standpoint. That was Roberson and Singletary. Dwaylon Roberts was the nucleus there. I maintain that if Marshall Henderson, which was on campus at the time, had he been eligible, Pat Knight would have stayed as the coach for at least a bit longer, because Marshall Henderson, as we all know, was a freak and really, really good, and ended up going to Ole Miss and being a folk hero there. Yeah, that's right. I mean,
that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, he was like the land shark or whatever his deal was. There were T-shirts and all that stuff. Yeah, NIL would have been crazy for guys like that. But now that all that has changed, and then Billy was hired. Billy had the 1 year as head coach, but then the beginning of the second year, early in the fall, things kind of went haywire, and obviously Chris Walker who's now doing stuff for CBS. He ended up being the interim coach for the year, and that was just a bizarre year traveling with them. You were very poor. You were not very. You were arguably one of the worst. I think you went 1-17, maybe. Oof. In the Big 12 conference. Yeah, it was.
But you had time. So now that we're reliving this, I mean, obviously you knew throughout that experience. I mean, you're considering, you're searching, you're looking, you're back channeling, you're working for a considerable amount of time to land where you landed on the other side of that, I guess, with Tubby Smith.
Yeah, and the irony here is Tubby, Kirby, and Dusty Womble were set to meet the day that Tubby skipped that meeting and was announced as the Memphis head coach. They were set to meet, and you know what they were going to meet about? A new basketball facility. Hey, we need a practice facility. Let's meet about it. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what we need and all those things. Tubby no-shows that meeting, and then the rest is history. Now you have this $40 million facility, and Tubby, ended up going to Memphis and then to High Point, his alma mater, and now he's retired. But that process at post Chris Walker, because I think they tried to see, would Chris be a good fit to stay here? I just don't know if there was enough confidence there in his ability to put a staff together or recruit at a high level or all those things. And so it took them a while to kind of identify Tubby as a candidate that would take this job. And then vet him and see if it would work, and if Tubby was doing the same thing with Texas Tech, because this wasn't exactly a great job at the time. It wasn't. Oh, yeah. You had no facility, no recent success, but now you've had you've had an Elite Eight, you've had a Final Four, you've had some Sweet 16s. You've been in the tournament here for a stretch. You got a $40 million facility in a beautiful arena, and people are filling it up more often than not. And so that's a lot to like. And your conference is also stable. Like if I'm in the Pac-12 conference right now, do I feel great about the future of my league and the future financing? Or are they going to start telling me, hey man, we're getting less money from TV. You're going to have to start busting to some of these games, or you're going to have to start cutting back here. We're going to have to cut your staff budget, by 25% because we're not getting as much money from the league. I mean, all that stuff factors in.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Different situation now with some different interests, obviously represented as far as some of the characters have changed, but also a similar interest in wanting to see Texas Tech basketball back in a fruitful position as, we've all been enduring the opening to this week together as you see seeds doled out and you're not in the picture. It's going to be a character building offseason for Texas Tech basketball, no question about it, but maybe you come out better on the other side. Chris, some great and not so great trips down memory lane there, but appreciate you sharing some of those memories in some hirings gone by, because while you've been in some of these kind of whirlwinds and it feels like you've maybe had a lot of change, coach-wise in a relatively short amount of time, not all have been exactly like this in quite some time where you've got just kind of a wide open net to cast. Because I think even when, Chris Beard comes on board, Chris Beard obviously had an identifiable and obvious connection to Lubbock, Texas in the program. And maybe somebody out there I'm missing right now, but I feel like this is a little bit different than that. So trying to re-engage those muscles that maybe haven't been used in a little bit of time here for Texas Tech to head out and find the next guy to lead the ship. So hopefully, Chris, you got the right guys on that task, because, man, it is no small task. And good grief, it's always a risk whenever you're bringing somebody new on board, rolling the dice every time, right? No matter what's happened in recent history with them.
Hiring coaches is a very difficult task, because you need some resources with which to hire good people. You need a little luck. They need a little luck with their roster and staying injury free, and some success. They need buy-in from family. There's a lot of things that have to come into play, some of which is under your control, some of which is not. That's the tricky part about trying to hire somebody. But because I immediately always go to people that you kind of have ties here or that have been here. I think that there's a benefit to that in some level, but you don't have to hire somebody that has ever been here before, or that's even been in the Big 12 before, per se, for them to be successful. That's sure. I don't buy that. I do think that those individuals would have some advantages initially, because they kind of have a grasp here of what this place is and what it isn't. And I think that is, and again, working with Kirby, I think certain bosses, that's also a component that we should discuss too, because so-and-so may want to go here because, man, that AD's in trouble, or, hey, that AD's got all kinds of job security I'm not worried about. Because if an AD ever switches jobs, all bets are off, because if you're a coach, right, you all work for the athletic director. And I think Kirby is on very, very solid ground here. So that also allows for, somebody not to be necessarily taking a chance by coming in here, because whoever they hire, they're going to get a 4 or 5 year deal, period. I mean, that's the way it's going to go. They're going to get 4 or 5 years contract. And if it's somebody that is very well sought after, or that you're paying big money to, they may even get a 6-year deal or something. If you felt like, okay, we got to give them an extra year just to get them to come here. But that's going to be fairly standard. But, and that's why the Barrett Peary's, the Grant McCaslin, some of those folks have been mentioned, because they have ties to Texas Tech, and they've been here before. They've been on this campus. They've coached in this arena before. Or a guy like Paul Mills, who was at Baylor for so many years, is coaching at Oral Roberts. He's been in the Big 12 as a longtime assistant, like Jerome Tang has. So they have competed against Texas Tech. They've recruited against Texas Tech. They've been in the state of Texas before. There's all these people that have either ties to the league, to the state, to the school, to whatever, that I think, allows them to have some benefits early on if they were to be the ones that hire. But I don't begin to know who they're looking at yet. I think it's still early, and I think that could change. I just don't think that, the Rick Pitino's or the Mike Krzyzewski's or the Tom Izzo's or the Bill Selfs of the world are going to be the next head coach at Texas Tech. Just my opinion.
Hey, dare to dream while you got the opportunity to, if that is your thing. Whenever things do change, we'll be here to process it all with you. Chris, thanks for the time once again, man. Appreciate the perspective as always.
Yes, sir. Keep hope alive. We'll keep rocking on.
You got it. Thank you for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And yep, March is here. So make Locked On College Basketball your second listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Chris, I'm Casey. Have a great one. We'll see you on the other side on Locked On Texas Tech.